Darkcast Network. The light shines brightest on our indie podcasts.
Two suspects are being one case involves. The FBI is now offering $100,000 to see if police are releasing marathon.
Welcome to Missing Mysteries. I'm your host, Keely, and this is a paranormal and true crime podcast. Today, I am taking us back to Gettysburg to finally tell you about the National Soldiers Orphanage homestead. Early in July, I covered the Jenny Wade house, and the orphanage was supposed to be the episode after, kind of tying in the Gettysburg stories together, but unfortunately COVID had a very different idea for this episode, and it is now almost a month later, so let's do another brief history of the Gettysburg history before jumping in. And I do want to warn that this episode will be covering child abuse. If this is a topic that is triggering for you, or it gets too difficult to listen to, I want to thank you for listening. If you do not get to the end, and I will warn that the child abuse is a little bit more towards the end, so you do have the history that you can go through with me.
Hi, listeners. We have a podcast to share with you that you can go binge over 50 episodes right now. Every Thursday, we bring you a new episode filled with mysteries, conspiracies, and things that go bump in the night. I'm Holly Lauerman. And I'm Brooke Sasser. And we are the hosts of Curly Conspiracies podcast. The name of our podcast stems from, well, our curly hair, and the idea that conspiracies and mysteries are never straightforward. They take multiple twists, turns, have-nots, and take a while to comb through. We have some lighthearted topics such as Eminem is a clone, the Coca-Cola conspiracy, and even the Kentucky meat shower. Some more serious topics like April is Blood Sacrifice Month, the Johnny Gosh disappearance, and the Nahanni Valley mystery. We also have your classics like the conspiracies surrounding Princess Diana's death, Mothman, and the Roswell incident. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. So, go get your tinfoil hats ready and check out Curly Conspiracies podcast.
Gettysburg was a town in Pennsylvania of only 2,400 people when the bloodiest battle of the American Civil War broke out in the town on July 1st, 1863. The American Civil War was started in 1861 when the Lincoln administration and the northern states, also known as the Union, wanted to abolish slavery, with the idea that during the 1840s and 1850s, many German and Irish immigrants made their way to America to escape the potato famine, and these immigrants could be hired for cheap labor instead of continuing enslaving African people taken from their country and their children born into slavery. However, the southern states did not like this because they used enslaved people for free labor on their plantations, as well as use their ownership of enslaved people as a sign of status and use it to gain respect of other plantation owners. This led the southern states to fight for a new Confederate of States under a new constitution, which is how they get the name Confederates. As for the Battle of Gettysburg, it was the Confederate General Robert E. Lee's attempt to hit the North in one of the most northern battles in hopes to take over the Northern Territory and shake the Lincoln administration into settling for peace instead of continuing the war. The South had 8,000 soldiers and the North had 100,000. The battle waged on for 3 days, from July 1st to the 3rd, before the North won a battle, sending the South back to Virginia. This battle left the town of Gettysburg with the body of over 7,000 soldiers, 3,000 horses, and the body of one civilian, Jenny Wade, who I talked about on my previous Gettysburg episode. It also left them with many wounded soldiers from both Union and Confederate side of the war. The town was finding bodies and burying them, including those who died after the battle, until October of 1863. Among the soldiers found in the carnage of the war was Amos Houston. Amos was a Union soldier found deceased by the daughter of a tavern owner shortly after the battle. He was found holding on to an embryo type which is a type of picture frame that had a picture of his 3 small children. The tavern owner's daughter brought the photo of the 3 children home to her dad, Benjamin Shriver, and the photo was added to the mementos from the battle he kept in his tavern. But when a doctor by the name of John Bourne from Philadelphia came into town to help the wounded, he found himself at the tavern where he saw this photo, and he could not rest, knowing that there was a family out there missing their father, not knowing of his fate or where his final resting place was. Having such a strong connection to this photo, he talked Benjamin into giving him the photo, which he sold copies of to raise money for the family of the soldier lost in battle, as well as sending copies to newspapers throughout the northern states in hopes to find Amos's family. What Dr. Bourne did worked, because after weeks of the unknown soldier's story being shared, it finally hit New York, where a family friend passed a copy of the newspaper to Philinda Houston, wife of Amos and mother of his 3 children, Frank, Fred, and Alice. To confirm that the soldier was Amos, the doctor made his way to Philinda and the kids to share the photo and frame he had received from Benjamin. He also presented her with the money raised by the community and used it to open up the orphanage that sits on Cemetery Hill, right where Amos was found after the battle. Before we talk about the opening of the orphanage and how it became haunted, I want to read to you from a monument in Gettysburg that has an etching of Amos and his children. Near this spot, on July 1st, 1863, a Union soldier fell mortally wounded. When a local resident found the unidentified body, he also discovered a photograph of 3 children. News of this poignant find was soon widely covered by the press, and copies of the photo was distributed and sold for charity. One of these reached Miss Philinda Houston of Portville, New York, who now realized that her husband, Sergeant Amos Houston of Company C, 154th New York Volunteers, had been killed. The plight of Houston's children, Frank, Frederick, and Alice, touched an outpouring of sympathy and donations from throughout the North, leading to the establishment of the Soldiers' Orphans Home in Gettysburg in 1866. Sergeant Houston's body was removed from here to the Gettysburg National Cemetery. When the orphanage opened in 1866, it was also opened as a home for widows. During this time, an orphan was a child who lost their father, since many widows would struggle to care for themselves and their children. This would send their children to orphanages and homes of other families or family members. Sometimes the widows would be able to stay with their children in cases like the Gettysburg Orphanage, where it was also a widow's home as well, and they could often live in these homes till the mother got remarried and they were no longer looked at as orphans. Among the first widows and orphans to live in the orphanage was Amos's wife and children. Philinda actually ran the orphanage, and she helped build it into the community. She set up a Memorial Day parade with the children and made it a nice home for the children with adults who truly cared for them. But eventually Philinda got remarried, and she left with the children to live with her second husband. All 3 of Houston's children went on to live good lives. From what we know, Frank became a doctor, Fred a successful merchant. As the children went on to live good lives, and Philinda lived the rest of her life with her second husband, life at the orphanage changed a lot after Philinda left. A woman named Rosa Carmicheal was hired to take care of and discipline the children, but Rosa didn't care much about the children and chose to focus on the discipline. I'm now warning you, I'm now going to be talking about child abuse. Rosa was very abusive towards all of the children. She would have the older children beat up the smaller kids with sticks. She created what she called the dungeon in the basement of the home, where she chained up the children she deemed as troublemakers, often leaving them alone, chained up in the dark for days, or even at times with other children. This dungeon was also right underneath where the other children would sleep, so they would have to listen to the other children crying and asking for help. Rosa would tie the children up on a fence outside in the summer day, leaving them outside to get dehydrated and sunburnt. She would put them in freezing water. And I know these are rough, but lastly, she would lock the children in the outhouse in freezing winter to the hot summer. The outhouse punishment would actually be what got Rosa caught. The town was already growing suspicious of Rosa because of how unwell and depressed the children looked while in the parade or walking around town, as well as the children who would disappear without explanations. But sadly, at this time, there was a certain amount of abuse and treatment to children that others would often look away from. In 1876, the town just couldn't hold back their concern anymore when Rosa locked a young boy in the outhouse during a cold winter night. The boy screamed and cried for help, and when neighbors came to help him, the police got involved, and an investigation into Rosa was started. When investigating Rosa, they found 2 young girls chained up in the dungeon, and they found torture tools all around the home. Rosa was arrested and charged with aggravated assault, child abuse, and child neglect. She was put on trial, where many of the children stood witness to her abuse. Rosa was found guilty and fined $20, which with today's inflation would be $553, and she was released from police custody. Rosa returned back to the orphanage, where she began to abuse the children again, especially the children who testified against her in trial. But a mob of citizens very quickly ran Rosa out of town, where she never was seen in Gettysburg again. The orphanage was closed in 1877 when Rosa was ran out of town, and the children were adopted by local families, family members from far away, and sent to other orphanages. In the 1950s, actor and Civil War buff Cliff Arquette bought the building and turned it into a Civil War museum based on the soldier's life during the war. Cliff would allow the tours of the basement for tourists curious about the orphans while he narrated the tours. This lasted for 10 years under Cliff's ownership and then was changed to the Soldiers' National Museum before closing in 2014. It is now the headquarters for the Ghostly Images tour and their gift shop, but they still offer private tours of the orphanage as well as paranormal investigations. Throughout all these different ownerships and uses of the building since the orphanage, the one thing that remains constant is the children that reside in the building. The history of the building can't tie any certain children to the haunting because there is not any record of children dying in the home. But under Rosa's rule, many children would go missing, no one knowing where they went, that she may have taken the lives of the children during the abuse. Most of the abuse in the home happened in the basement, and today it is the location of the home with the most activity. From guests on tours, hearing, seeing, and feeling paranormal activity. Some of the most common is hearing children's laughter, hearing chains moving when there is only one chain left in the basement today. Children are heard running and crying. Children's voices are heard responding in EVPs and in real time, as well as a woman's voice, believed to be Rosa, is also heard in EVPs and in real time. Guests will see children in the home even when no children are on the tour. On one tour, there were 2 women that attended, and they took a picture of them standing in the basement. Standing in between them was a small boy. This picture is pretty popular in paranormal groups, and many don't even realize it's possibly a spirit of a little boy. That's how real he looks. This photo, if I can find it, will be on my Instagram. But that little boy is not the only little boy seen. A mist is seen lingering in the entrance of the dungeon, and a small boy is seen standing in one particular shadowy corner, only to disappear before guests can tell anyone or take a picture of him. A woman is also seen in the basement that is believed to be Rosa, who is described as looking very angry and mean. Toys that the owners have set up over time and guests have left, especially the teddy bears and the balls, will move on their own. A recent guest on a tour, such as a Squishmallow keychain that was being held and tugged on our entire tour, and the next day she actually came back to leave that squishmallow little keychain for the children. And at times if guests will move or play with the toys, especially during investigations, employees will come into the basement to find that they have been put back the way they were before. As for feeling, there is a general feeling of sadness in the building. People's clothes will be tugged on like a child is grabbing them, which the spirits of the children in Jenny Wade's house also do over there. People will feel a child's hand on them, and when they look back at their photos, evidence will show a child's hand that was on them when they felt this, especially when they are alone in the dungeon. Then the touching gets a little bit more violent. Guests report being hit, scratched, and pulled on. One of the members of the ghostly imaging tour company shared that on a tour, a man who was not really a believer was sitting on the bench listening when he was pulled so violently from behind he was practically thrown against the wall. This man very obviously left the tour after this event. The basement of the home may be the most active and scary, but the home overall has its share of paranormal activity. Throughout the home, especially in the dining room where the children would eat, children are heard talking and playing. They're heard laughing and walking around. Conversations from adults can also be heard at times, including a man who will tell people to get out. Many people believe he could have been a previous owner before the orphanage or a soldier there after the battle. Rosa, or maybe another female spirit, is seen peeking out of windows and walking around the home. The orphan children may still live on in the old orphanage, but in recent years, reports of the children becoming more active around town has increased, including activity in the Jenny Wade house and encounters with children's spirits in the old battlefields where they would have played. The town of Gettysburg is a town full of history from one of the bloodiest battles in the Civil War, and just how the residents kept pushing forward after the carnage and the injured took over their town. I believe with any event, especially one like the Battle of Gettysburg, it creates a certain energy that even spirit-free you will feel for years and years to come. Throughout my research of the Jenny Wade house and the Gettysburg Orphanage, it really made me think about the energy of the town, especially with so many seeking out spirits. If you want to hear more about this, check out Misty Mysteries Patreon, because I will go more into my theories on energy and the town in my tea and behind the scenes, which starting in last week's episode, the greatest art heist will be available for every episode. If you want to visit the orphanage today and the Jenny Wade house, you can do so by booking a tour with ghostly images, which I will have linked in the episode description. For now, I want to thank you for listening. If you liked the episode, please let me know by leaving a good review and feedback and sharing with your friends. Please stay safe, stay hydrated, and I will see you next week.